It's Friday night, and that means we have a weekend of all football action. Same faces, new name, more fun. Let's get after it. This is Football Friday. What is up, everyone? Welcome to the first ever Football Friday. It is the same show as what we have been doing, except now we are merging college football and NFL until the football season as a whole is over. Because, as you know, college football is winding down. We have a couple more weeks of real action coming up. And then after that, there isn't much to talk about because, quite frankly, bowl season is boring. So this is the Iceman, Matt Freites. Welcome to Football Friday. That is the coach. How you doing, buddy?
Iceman, doing well. We are upon the holiday season, right? I feel like this next week sort of kicks everything off with Thanksgiving, short work week, right into the holidays. But I have to admit, around the coach's house here, there was some Christmas decorating that occurred last weekend, and I used to be a hardliner, man. Like, you don't decorate until after Thanksgiving. But I think that the pandemic really changed my perspective of that because I love Christmas. And I'm like, you know what? Like, after going through all that craziness, I was like, what's so bad about more of a good thing, right?
Nothing.
More
Yep.
happiness, enjoying it longer. So, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist, but I was able to justify adjusting my perspective, and I'm happy I did.
Always a good thing in life to adjust your perspective, especially as you get older, because it's just the way it works. So I'm with you. I think when you have young children, that your perspective does change a little bit because I can tell you that the young man in our house, who will be in here very, very shortly to make not one, but two picks this time. So we are ramping things up, but he has been very excited. And we are leaving tomorrow for Charleston, South Carolina. But do not worry, Jonah. We will be live again next week, possibly thrice. You never know. We'll get into that in a minute, but we're kind of the same way. So we got the decorations downstairs, and they are ready for when we get home from this week-long trip in South Carolina over Thanksgiving. And that Sunday we get back, much like this show, we're getting after it. We are decorating, and we are going. Christmas is going to throw up all over the house. And Jonah, that is a direct quote from your mom. So that is exactly what's going to happen in the Freites household, and I'm excited.
So I have a question for you.
Yes.
My wife and I were having this conversation last night. What is your Christmas decor style? Do you think that you have one?
Yes, I do. I am not one of those new agey people. I much prefer a cozy sort of. Now, I should preface this with, you got to remember, you and I are of the same age. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And so much of my mom's decor, which came from the 80s, was a lot of garland, a lot of flashing lights, colored lights, things of this nature. But when it comes to decorating, I don't like new age Santa. I'm not a big fan of like Santa and sunglasses. I want the big beard. I want the big belly. I want the big furry red coat. And I'm much more of a traditionalist when it comes to decorating. However, I do have a hard line in my outdoor lights are colored. I am not hearing anything else.
Dude, that's what sparked the conversation because I am a passionate supporter of colored Christmas lights. And my wife,
as you should be.
My wife loves the white lights. And I'm like, there's a place for them. I'm not disagreeing that they can be used to accent colored lights in some way, shape, or form. But I think that I just, I was trying to describe to her because, what else was something else that was a part of the conversation was that, I sensed a little displeasure with maybe what was perceived to be my lack of enthusiasm for the decorating process. And so what I explained was it's not that I have no problem with the fact that we're decorating, but I just feel that I have preferences as far as what I like in terms of decorations go, a style. we disagree on those styles, and so I'm fine to let you do what you want to do, but you're gonna do it. And I mean something along those lines. And it's kind of one of those. It's tough to be motivated when you feel like you're not maybe not enjoying the process as much as you would if you felt like your preferences were being incorporated. Now, through conversation, I did, she pointed out several different aspects of our decorations that I have had input on and that are catered to my style. So it's probably more collaborative than I give it credit for. But I did some Googling because she said, "Can you give me an example of what your style is?" And I did find a name for it. It's
Okay.
uh it was called, like, Classic Christmas Traditional. Like, that's literally, like that was a name. I found it multiple times. Any images I found were pretty spot on as far as the types of things that I enjoy. But, yeah, at the heart of my preferred decor is colored lights, absolutely.
Yes. So, one of the hardest things to do when you become in a committed relationship is taking what you have always done in the holidays, what somebody else has always done in the holidays, and bringing them together. My wife and I went through this because, again, my perception of the holidays was as much color, as much flash as possible. And that was not her style, right? She grew up in a much more, I don't even want to say traditional style. It was just definitely a much more muted style. Her family doesn't do Christmas the way that mine did, in the sense that we were all Christmas, right? Everything was Christmas. The towels were Christmas. The placemats were Christmas. Like everything went that direction. My mom loved that time of year. So that's what she did, because when she was a kid, that was the only time of year where things felt normal for them, because my grandmother went out of her way to make them feel less poor as they were growing up, right? And so my wife, again, was kind of not into that. But as things come over time, right, you start to take both ideas and bring them together. And I think that's the hardest part, is like figuring out a happy medium between the two. Now, what we have found here is there's compromises to be made. So here's a great example: is our tree is artificial. We don't do real trees because it's a lot of hassle with a dog and now a kid and all that. But she likes white lights on a Christmas tree. I like colored. So we bought lights that interchange. So now we can change them back and forth, and we kind of go every other day. We switch things off. The outside is a different story, all color. That's my domain, and that's fine. But we have some decorations that are white lights. They're like a reindeer, a Santa, and they accent what is going on. And we're actually going to put up like wreaths this year that are going to have some white lights on them. So now your colored lights pop even more. And you're right, there's a time and place for everything. But her style of decorating is definitely more along the lines of like farm colonial. And so what she likes in decorations totally matches what I'm into. And so she has free domain to buy any of the decorations that she wants. As a matter of fact, today she went to a Christmas house and was like, it wasn't that bad, in talking about the bill. And I was like, I don't care. You can buy whatever you'd like. And we have more than a quarter of our crawl space is Christmas decorations. Have at it. Just absolutely have at it. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, great time of year. And I mean, nothing says football Friday like a little Christmas decor
Hey,
conversation, right?
I mean, it's real life. So you brought up something that I was going to use to segue, and now I completely forgot because we got so into Christmas that I can't even remember. But you talked about having more fun, and Brad and I have been talking for the last couple weeks, I would say, because we have been very much enjoying what we're doing here, and that is the live show every Friday. And we do enjoy the other stuff that we have done. But one of our big things together, I think, is we want to grow, we want to evolve, and when it feels natural, not just for the sake of it. So we've been talking, and we're ready to move on to a new phase of Iceman and Coach, which is going to be called INC Live. And you see in the corner here, we have already sort of started that moniker. And what is that going to be? Well, we're kind of moving to an all live format going forward. And that's why I teased we might be going live 3 times next week, because we are more ourselves when we're live. I think that our content is more organic, we have more fun, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to put out standalone videos and other things that we have traditionally done, or audio for that matter. So the INC main show is going to still be there. We're going to do that live. We're going to post that audio, but at the end of it, we're going to take mailbag questions, a few of them. So that is going to be akin to watching the Pat McAfee show or any type of sports show where people are talking to each other. We're not going to engage in the comments until the end. This show, INC Live, which will be not just Football Friday, any other sport, is going to be directly linking with you, the viewer who was on here. So the comments are going to be very important. So we're hoping to give you two different experiences with the same Iceman and Coach that you all know. So Brad, I'm excited about the new direction. And this is technically the first one of those, but we're going to be testing the waters next week as Thanksgiving night. We're going to be live watching some 49ers and Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. It'll be a different experience for sure to enjoy a live football game. I mean, we're not going to show the game, but we're going to be talking about it, just having general conversation about what's happening as we watch. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, and hopefully a few people hop in the comments and join us throughout the game. But I agree with you. I think that we're more natural in the live setting, and maybe we've learned over time, and you could speak more to this than me, of course, but when we do even our pre-recorded shows, I think that you're probably not having to do a ton of editing, because I think as far as the conversations go, they're typically pretty smooth. I mean, yeah, you can clean it up and enhance the sound in different ways, but there's not really the need for a ton of editing of the content itself. And so in that case, why not just roll it live like we do and kind of capitalize on that experience that we get with the listeners too.
Yeah. And there's no shortage of content throughout the sports here. And again, it'll give us some time or give us opportunities to do different things. And that's kind of, for me, what it comes down to is this is the natural progression of it. And I'm looking forward to it. I have learned a lot about putting on live production. And while we have our mistakes, we have equipment issues. Again, we're mom and pop here. Like, I'm in my attic right now. So it's not the easiest thing. And I was hesitant at first because I wanted us to get better at it. And I feel like we have grown organically. We have people who show up every week, and that means a lot to us. And so in my mind, we're rewarding those people with more interaction and being able to see our faces live more often. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And we'll see how we can hold up over time doing this. But I think at first, we will have a good time with it. And then when the show is ready to evolve, it will once again change and evolve and grow.
Not to stay away from football for too long, but there was something that I heard the other morning on my way to work, and I wanted to share it with you. And it's definitely easier to share it this way than through a text or whatever. I was listening to one of the local radio stations, traditionally an AM radio station. They have an FM station that simulcasts the same thing. It's just better quality. The sound is. Anyways, they were talking about politicians, and one of them made the comment of, I want politicians that are experienced in actually legislation and blah 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 blah. I mean, that part's irrelevant, but one of the guys piggybacked on it, said, yeah, kind of like every podcaster who thinks they're a broadcaster now because everybody can start a podcast or something like that. And
Yep.
I was like, man, like you could tell he was just really, and this is a guy that's been on the radio for forever, for probably 40 years. You could tell that they kind of have a certain view of the podcasting community as, your traditional radio broadcasters.
Yeah, it's a different medium. The times are different. It takes nothing away from people who do this on the radio. And it really, to get it back to football, takes nothing away from the people who actually analyze this stuff. But I will say that there are people who analyze stuff on either at the college or NFL, and I'm not entirely sure that they actually know what they're talking about. I think that they just spew takes for the sake of spewing takes, and not everybody's that way. But there are definitely a lot of these talking heads, especially former players sometimes, who I feel like are there just to gaslight. And that to me doesn't help. So there's no difference between them and us, really, outside of the fact that they get paid a shitload more money than we do. And Dave, it is okay that you can't hang tonight. We always appreciate you. And we will, of course, catch up with you. Please make sure to check out Political Football every single week. I know they'll be live next week.
Thanks for stopping by, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. So let's get to some football, shall we? Now, we've always done the college roll call. Well, again, Dave is on a revenge tour, even though he has not played a snap for the Michigan Wolverines. He is the loudest person in the room as it relates to effing the Big Ten in this, I would say, hit job that they have on the University of Michigan. Now, we are not going to get into that. We've been in that before. We're going to wait for that to roll. And when Jim Harbaugh becomes the next Bears coach, maybe we'll have something else to say about it. But for the meantime, so we've historically done college roll call, and now we're going to call it just roll call. But I want to talk about a player. We've added the University of Illinois on here, so a shout out to our boy Ryan Leskis. And A couple weeks ago, he randomly texted me. I thought he was texting the wrong person, if I'm being honest. And it was telling me about a player named John Paddock, who apparently is, I believe, a third generation player or third generation University of Illinois student, graduate, whatever you want to call it. I think he had two generations who played football before him. He transferred there this year. He's been riding the pine, as they like to say. Well, he got his big chance last week against Indiana, came in, got the start, threw for 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, and got them the big win. And I thought it was worthy of being put on our roll call because, quite frankly, that's a cool story now that he's actually gotten in and been able to contribute. So there's a family connection, and we're big on that.
No, it's a really neat story. And when you had told me initially, I was like, okay, like cool premise, but like, did he do something relevant in the game? And this is a couple weeks ago before like he's
you were a little rough on the guy.
I didn't mean to be, and I totally understand how it came across that way, but it just seemed random.
It was random. The
you know
text
what I
message
mean?
was definitely random.
And I was like, cool, but like, did he do something today to like be worth mentioning, I guess? And what's funny is the very next week after I asked that question, he definitely did something worth mentioning.
Yes, he definitely did. And the text message that I received last Saturday, Paddock for Heisman, made more sense now that I knew exactly what was going on. But we want to say before we move on, so the roll call is going to be not just colleges, but pro teams now, because we're going to be talking some NFL. So if you have a pro team, we're going to add that on here too. Now, you and I are Patriots and Colts fans, and that game was offensive. So we're not going to talk about either of our teams going forward. But anybody who is in the feed now who has a pro team that they'd like to shout out, we're going to talk about some NFL. So hopefully over time we can gradually put some of that content in here. But that is the new roll call, and we'll continue to add to it. But I also want to say too, non-football related, that Ryan Leskis, who is the host of Pain Productions, Paign Productions, he is out of Champaign, Illinois, works at the University of Illinois, and he is a big proponent of the Illini, big proponent of Champaign, Illinois, and his podcast is kind of, I think it's fun because he loves where he lives, and it's a very localized podcast. So definitely hit him up, check him out, and sometimes he gets really, really high and talks fantasy football, and that's hilarious.
So this is the perfect time. Like the timing for this just worked out fantastically.
Yes. Okay.
The University of Illinois. So
Yes.
my dad like just walked over to me with this big smile on his face, holding his phone in his hand, and like wanted to show me something. And he shows me his phone, and it's a score of a college basketball game that's happening right now.
Okay.
And it's Valparaiso University, who's picked to finish dead last in the Missouri Valley Conference where Bradley plays, is currently leading the University of Illinois 49-45. Now there's 15 minutes to go in the game. That's a long ways to go. So I have every belief in the world that the U of I is going to pull this thing off. But my goodness, that would be a very, very bad loss for the Illini.
Yes, it would. But I'm actually surprised that both teams are in the 40s. It is Big Ten basketball. Usually those games end in the 30s somewhere. So that is actually a big night for the Illini. But go Illini, I guess. Valpo is known for one of the best buzzer beaters in NCAA tournament history, but that was a billion years ago. So
I mean, it'd be a great win for the Missouri Valley because you get that win, and then obviously it improves strength of schedule and all that stuff, which is critical amongst mid-majors when it comes to postseason resumes. Now, the Valley's, for the most part, most likely a one-bid league, but if the stars align and you have a team that puts together a really good season but doesn't win the tournament, there is at least a chance.
Yes, there is a chance. So we cut our teeth on this show talking about college football, so we're going to continue to start with college football. Now, the college football rankings came out, and the Dogs are top dog, no pun intended, in the college football playoff.
Who let the dogs out, man?
That's
Who
right.
let the dogs out on Saturday?
Really didn't change, but Lane Kiffin lost the game that I said he always loses, and Georgia dominated a top 10 opponent. Whether you think that Ole Miss was a top 10 opponent or not, they were. They were number 9 in the college football playoff. 52-17 is not only a win, it's style points. And I think that is what vaulted Georgia back on top. And I honestly think it's fine at this point because Ohio State's resume hasn't gotten any better since they've been playing, and Georgia's has. And I think that it's perfectly reasonable to think that they would pass them. Michigan and Florida State still sitting in 3 and 4, so none of that has changed. I think Florida State, though, is in possibly a precarious position. Now, they have qualified for the ACC tournament, the ACC title game, so they will get a chance to cement their legacy if they win out, of course. But I'm telling you right now, Washington, Oregon, if they went out and played each other, man, a one-loss Oregon team who's a Pac-12 champion, that's going to be tough to argue against Florida State's resume, is it not?
Yeah, it's going to be tough to argue for sure because I've well documented here saying I'm not sold on Florida State. I don't know that they get through the season in the ACC championship unscathed because I think there's a good chance that they could play Louisville in the ACC title game, and Louisville has proven to be very solid. They have a very
Yes.
good defense, and I, I think that will be a great game if it happens. Louisville has to beat Miami this week in Miami to solidify their place in that game. I think, I expect that to happen. I think it'll be a low scoring game, but I expect Louisville to win. Anyhow, yeah, does it feel to you? It feels to me like there's two programs right now that have chips on their shoulders, and they're both starting to play like they do, and that is Georgia and Michigan, in my opinion. And it just feels like they're on a collision course. And that's not to dismiss Florida State, Washington, Oregon, even Ohio State, whatever. It just feels like those two teams are just better than everyone else at this point in time. Now, we'll see, of course, but it really feels that way. I don't know what you think.
Well, when you look at this top four now, you have two teams that are one of the two is going to be eliminated. Ohio State or Michigan is going to be eliminated. Now, I happen to think that Michigan is better. So I think that Michigan is going to be that representative from the Big Ten.
Agreed.
So Florida State, if they win out, is going to make it because of that fact.
Yes.
The two teams are not going to jump over Florida State. So I think that Florida State has to lose to be out. But if it were to come down to, let's say that it wasn't Michigan or Ohio State and it was another team, let's say Texas, right? Let's say Texas was in there. So we had four conferences that were represented. An undefeated Washington team, in my opinion, should jump over an undefeated Florida State team, both as conference champions, because I think that their resume would be better. They'd have beaten Oregon twice, which is pretty amazing.
I agree. We've talked all year about how good the Pac-12 has been. And, Florida State has been on the ropes against some mediocre competition a few times this year. So, and maybe those teams are better than we give them credit for. Boston College, teams like that.
I don't know about that.
I just think that Washington's better. I mean, it's just the eye test in general. So it will be interesting to see how the committee would handle that if you had what looked like to be a number 5 undefeated Washington and a number 4 undefeated Florida State.
Yeah.
Going into the selection show, how that pans out. And I'm curious to see, do you think how this playoff ends up turning out impacts things like conference realignment? Do you think like if a Florida State somehow gets left out in the cold, one loss or whatever, they're looking and saying like, let's say Alabama, one loss Alabama gets in over one loss Florida State somehow, which I think that one loss Alabama is better than one loss Florida State if that were to be the case, truthfully.
Well, especially since that would mean that they'd be SEC champions having beaten Georgia.
That is true. Yes. So, but does that make a program like Florida State go, man, it's like we're banging our heads against the wall. It's like it's almost like they're being punished for being in the ACC in a way.
Conference realignment has nothing to do, in my opinion, with anything other than money. So I don't think it matters. As long as Florida State feels like they are getting the largest piece of the pie in the ACC, they don't care. I really don't think it matters. I don't think, yes, the Pac-12 is better than the ACC.
Yes, I think so.
For this year, and then we will never have that discussion again. But for now, yes, the Pac-12 is better than the ACC top to bottom. I think there are more good teams in the middle of that conference. I'm talking about the Pac-12 than the ACC. But yes, I don't. So no, I don't think that it's going to matter. I think that it'll have to do with money. It'll have to do with conferences needing a Florida team because there's not really a natural place for Florida State right now. I mean, I guess unless the Big Ten and the SEC just become these massive conferences. So I don't think they're going to go anywhere. But when you look at this top 10, do you realize that there's a lot of potential for chaos still, even though there's a couple of weeks to go? Georgia and Alabama have solidified their places in the SEC title game. So that is happening. So Alabama could definitely still make the playoff as an SEC champion. I think Georgia's better, but they have their shot. Michigan and Ohio State play each other. In theory, Washington and Oregon are going to play each other, and Louisville may play Florida State in the ACC title game. So there are, 8 teams currently in this top 10 that could be in play for the playoff, and that's where you want to be right now. And next year with the 8-team playoff, it's only going to get better. I think it's 8 teams, right?
And 12 next year.
Sorry.
So what happens if these what ifs? I honestly, I root for chaos. I think that ultimately this is going to be very cut and dry by the time it's all said and done. Unfortunately, because that's not interesting to me. But what if Iowa, who has a very good shot of being the West representative in the Big Ten title game, what if somehow they come out and beat Michigan 7-3 in the Big Ten title game?
Can we not?
I mean, but what happens then? You have one loss Ohio State, one loss Michigan. Let's say Bama beats Georgia. I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff that could happen, but it probably won't. We have a visitor.
We do have a visitor. It is that time. The guest picker is here. It is. Yes, here he is. Just give me a second, my man.
Get the man some headphones.
This is not a professional thing we have going on here, so please bear with us over there on the other side. Yep,
did the producer not prepare him in the green room before coming on?
Okay.
Hi, James.
All right. James Allen, you are here. Let me switch the slide. Okay, to catch everybody up, James Allen is now 8-2 as the Missouri Tigers got a definitive win over the Tennessee Volunteers, 36-7. So James has never been more right as he was last week. So James has requested something of us. And James, do you remember what you asked me? How many games did you ask me to pick?
2.
Yes, you have asked me to pick 2 games. So your father, your boss, has decided that you are going to pick 1 college game and 1 NFL game. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to pick the college game first. You're looking at the sheet as if you can read it. We are going to look at the college. We're going to pick the college game first. Okay. I want you to say 2 schools for me. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Say Miami.
Miami.
Louisville.
Louisville.
Who's going to win?
Miami.
Ooh, a big
boy.
upset. An upset that I'm not unconvinced could happen, except for the fact that their starting quarterback is out and Tyler Van Dyke is terrible. So I think Louisville is probably going to take it, but so you are certain Miami over Louisville?
Yeah.
Bold
All
pick.
right. So that is his first pick. A bold pick. He's gone bold before. He has picked a Florida team that has not worked out. So we will see what happens. I think Louisville is a pretty heavy favorite. We'll talk about that. Actually, let me look at that right here as we have the sheet. Miami's a 1-point favorite at home. So he might be onto something here.
James has been on the phone with Vegas setting that line.
Possibly. Okay, so for your professional game, one more game. You ready? Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. Can you say Pittsburgh?
Pittsburgh.
Cleveland.
Cleveland.
Okay, who's going to win?
Cleveland.
Okay, so you have decided the Cleveland Browns, who are 1.5-point favorites at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers, is going to win this week. So to recap for everybody, James is picking 2 games now, and he has chosen the Miami Hurricanes to upset the 9-1 Louisville Cardinals, and you have chosen the Cleveland Browns at home to upset the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm very excited for this. Are you excited?
Yes.
Okay, do you want to tell everybody where we are going tomorrow? What state are we going to tomorrow? Where do Noni and Papa live?
In South Carolina.
There you go. We will be
Great
in
job.
South Carolina next week. James is very, very excited. Next week is Thanksgiving. James, will you say good night to everybody and to have a wonderful Thanksgiving?
Good night, everybody, and have a good Thanksgiving.
All right.
You too,
Thanks,
James.
buddy. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, buddy. Thank you so much.
Dad, I forgot to do something.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you want to show off your new. My apologies. Here.
Oh, what do we got?
Speaking of Christmas decor, yes, I'm
Gingerbread
so sorry.
man?
We are hijacking the feed with gingerbread men.
Men.
Yes, men. So James is a big fan of his gingerbread lovies. Santa is downstairs, and we are in that mode. So James and the gingerbread crew, thank you so very much, and I will talk to you in the morning, buddy. Okay. Say goodnight to Coach Brad.
Good night, Coach Brad.
Good
All
night,
right.
James. James and the Gingerbread Men. That could be like a band name.
Oh, it's definitely a band name. I'm not sure it's like a ska name, but it's definitely like 1960s pop, pop.
Yeah.
Like the Beach Boys, James and the Gingerbread Men. So,
That'd be
yeah, James
great.
with a pretty bold pick. He's now enraptured with Villanova and Maryland on my television, which is college basketball.
There you
So
go. He's
INC Live.
preparing himself.
Yes. INC Live, we will be covering college basketball at some point in time. So stay tuned for that. And James is off to bed. So let's talk about what happened in week 11. And I think we need to start with Jimbo got fired, man. It finally happened, and happened in a way that couldn't have been any better. Texas A&M flaunting the check that essentially paid for his buyout. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and they had made up their mind, right, before that game even took
Yeah.
place. And so on the heels of a big victory, he gets fired with $71 million buyout. I saw
78.
78, excuse me. I saw something the other day saying he's making like, I don't know what it was, $28,000 a day for the next 8 years. I mean, is what it equates out to over time. And that's not how he will literally be paid out, of course. But I mean, that's incredible. Is there I think you asked this question, right? Is there any other profession that works that way? Like where you could get paid that much to no longer work for the organization that previously employed you?
Now, companies do provide severance packages when they lay off or fire employees a lot of times. So it's not as if the idea of paying somebody who no longer works for you is unprecedented. It's the amount of money. Now, I always say that the markets are relative because it's economics, so that's going to happen. But my point is, this is a lot of money. Like,
Yeah.
he is getting paid to not show up to the building, and a lot of money to not show up to the building. And I guess my question in totality is, how do these things get written into the contract? Like, I just do not understand. I mean, I guess because the coach, the employee needs to be covered for being fired for anything other than cause. I don't know if like performance is cause, because it seems like whenever a college coach is fired, it's just because they don't like how he's performing. But is that really like written into the contract? Like, are there records into you know what I'm saying? Into the contract? I don't know. So I find it interesting that these coaches, I mean, the guy at Indiana has a massive buyout, and he's probably going to keep his job because Indiana can afford that. Texas A&M can afford it, but a lot of schools can't. It's just fascinating. And I thought what Ed Orgeron said was so true. Tell me when you want me to leave and out which door. And he is
I'm gone.
living fat off of his severance package, which was like $50 million.
Sure. Now, do you think, I mean, NIL, of course, is going a long ways to remedy this, but do you think that there is a huge disparity between how the players are treated and handled versus the coaches? And not just in the sense of these buyouts and compensation, but even going back to, the one that sticks out in my head, like Pete Carroll, right? Like all these bowl bans and sanctions come down on USC. He knows they're coming. He leaves town and goes and takes a Seahawks job. Basically suffers zero consequences as a result of his wrongdoings while running the program at USC. And then those who come in after him have to bear the burden. And I think that it's just an interesting dynamic. I don't know if there's some sort of magical solution that levels the playing field. I'm not insinuating that. I just find it fascinating.
Well, I think that the transfer portal kind of evens the playing field a little bit with that, because what traditionally has been true is that the players had no leverage at all because they'd have to give up a year of eligibility to move anywhere else. Whereas now, I mean, there are limitations to the transfer portal, of course. Like you can only transfer, I think, twice or something like that, whatever the
I think
rule
the
is.
first one you can transfer and play right away. The second time now you have to sit a year.
Right.
And that was recently implemented, I believe,
Sure.
which I think changes recruiting a little bit.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
and to use what I think is a more practical example of this is me and my dad talk about in regards to like Bradley basketball being a mid-major program. If you get a really good freshman, let's say that you just you saw something in a kid that nobody else saw, everybody else undervalued him, you bring him as a freshman, he's a stud. There's a great chance that someone's going to show up with a bag of money at one of these Power 5 schools and recruit him away from you before his sophomore year. And there's nothing you can do to stop that.
Nope.
But let's say that you utilize the transfer portal to get a guy in. Well, guess what? Like he just uses one free transfer on you, and it's much more of a burden on him to transfer again at that point. So there's more security from a recruiting standpoint in that sense, which I think is interesting because, like I mentioned, I think it changes maybe how you approach recruiting a little bit. Football, I mean, big time power football, maybe not so much. I mean, on that much of a strategic level because the rosters are so big too. But it just adds a whole new element to things. It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out too over the next 5 to 10 years.
I think now, though, coaches are probably more disposable and dispensable than they have ever been, because it used to be that the coach was what got people to come to the school. I don't think it's any longer the case. Like, unless you come with a pedigree, you're pretty much fair game. It doesn't matter. I mean, remember, Jimbo Fisher has won a national title and they're moving on from him. UCLA is moving on from Chip Kelly. And can we all remember that Chip Kelly literally invented an offense? And he has been aged out of this game. Like, he's a dinosaur in this game. I really don't think it matters. I think that Nick Saban probably can coach as long as he wants, but as long as the results are there. And at Alabama, if he starts to fade, they have a statue of him, but something tells me that if he's losing out because these other schools are paying more money for these kids, that Alabama will pay to get him out of the way, because they need to get him out. And I think coaches have changed a little bit in that fact that I think Deion Sanders is a personality. But again, how long does he last at Colorado? This year, he gets a pass for how they have done, because I think they have over-delivered on expectations. But what happens if they're a 4-win team in 2 years? Does it matter? You know what I mean? Like, he's gone, right? Like, he's not going to survive that, because you need to be getting the kids in there. And the only way to do that is to pay them whatever it is the going rate at that time.
I feel like, I mean, college fans / boosters, probably more so, they will eat their own more so than a lot of other types of organizations. It's really fascinating, like how much you could be like a group of people's favorite person and very quickly go to their least favorite person, and in such an extreme fashion. Is there, again, I asked the question, is there anywhere else where it's things could shift that quickly without you doing something extremely damning, like with just literally winning less games? Like, that's all it takes. Look at Dabo, man. Like what we talked about over the last couple of weeks, and the heat he started catching, and that guy's had a ton of success. So I think you're right. If Saban started slipping up at Alabama, I would 100% expect the Alabama boosters to start finding a way, raising funds to write that check so they could find the next shiny new thing.
Oh yeah, if they've got the money, it'll happen. And as you saw, Texas A&M with a check for $160 million at halftime. So anything is possible, and Jimbo Fisher is gone. I think that it'll be fascinating to see how NIL evolves over time, and then how these coaches evolve. And I think that the name of the coach becomes less and less important as long as the program is winning, and as long as the program is getting the players that they need to win. And speaking of teams that are in dire straits outside of their record, JMU, as we talked about, 3 weeks ago, that they're in a postseason ban, and they put in, or attempted to put in, a waiver for postseason access. The NCAA denied it. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm gonna get pissed, because that is dumb.
I heard a interesting perspective on this literally like 30 minutes before we came on. And I was scrolling through TikTok, and some of you may have seen this gentleman out there. He's primarily college football guy. Rico knows. He was on, Budge had him on his show, or did something with him. So he said, hey, a lot of people are up in arms about the JMU thing. He said, yeah, you could argue the rule's archaic, but he started explaining why the rule exists. And honestly, when he explained, I'm like, makes sense, because I'd never heard the rule described, or the reasoning behind it. And he said the probationary period exists not because they're trying to ban you from bowls or make you, he said it's purely from a sustainability perspective. He says when you're going from the FCS to the FBS, you're increasing by like 20 something scholarships now that you have to provide. So there's money that comes with that. There's extra resources in the way of training staff, medical staff, support, all the support staff that you have to sustain a Division I program. And the reason that they do not allow teams during their probationary period to play in bowl games is because they want to see because if you go to a bowl game, right, you're going to get a big influx of money. So they want you to basically prove that you can sustain for a period of time without the added compensation of going to a bowl game. Because let's say you go to JMU goes to a bowl game for the next 3 years, but all of a sudden the coach leaves, they bring a coach in, he's not successful, and then they don't make a bowl game for 6, 7 years in a row. Is that going to bankrupt the program? Are they capable of sustaining a stretch like that? So granted, this is only a 3-year probationary period, I believe, but can they, they're basically having to prove that they can sustain as a Division I football program without the additional resources. No, and his analogy he used, I thought was very good. He said, it'd be no different than if you were going to go, you were trying to get a mortgage or buy a car, and your income wasn't great, but last week you won $20,000 in the lottery. And so while if you added that to your current income, it looks, oh, okay, well, yeah, you can afford this, but like that's not income that's going to be, that's not consistent, dependable revenue, right? That was a one-off situation. It's not indicative of your long-term sustainability. So hearing it like that, I'm like, truthfully, and I've been just as fired up about this as anybody, thinking it was preposterous. It makes sense, and like, I don't know, maybe what you could do is you could say, hey, like the NCAA could say, hey, these are the reasons we do this. You can qualify for a bowl game, but you have to waive the compensation that comes along or something, which is still kind of shitty, I guess. But I understand why they do it now. And I was like, it totally changed my perspective, honestly.
And what it sounds like to me, I mean, because that's almost unfair, right? When you are a program that is making the move upward, this deck is already stacked against you. And again, in my opinion, it's just another way for the NCAA to continue to have some semblance of control. The rule is archaic. I get it. You're trying to save people from themselves. But if that's the case, then why the hell even bring them up in the first place, right? Because you're rewarding them for being good at the level that's below. You're rewarding them by bringing them up. And then as part of that reward, you're saying, yes, but. And those kids at JMU are playing their ass off, and they deserve to be recognized in some way. And what upsets me about it, money aside, is that they're putting their bodies on the line for this game. And at the end of the season, the NCAA says, hey, great season, do it again. And is that really fair? I mean, think about it. I mean, I get what you're saying. I get the reasons, the financial reasons and all of that. And that's all well and good. But I think that it sucks for the kids on that team, many of whom are probably seniors, or some of whom who are seniors, never going to get that chance again. And to me, to make the move up is already hard enough. And to dominate in this way is equally as hard. So now,
Sure.
I get it. This 3-year probationary period, fine. But like, to me, it just feels like another way for the NCAA to say, we have something. And that's all.
To play devil's advocate, what I mean, those players knew what they're signing up for by playing for JMU, right? I mean, there's nothing that stopped them from, I mean, they're obviously good players, right? There's nothing to stop them from leaving to go play elsewhere where they could have had a shot at playing in the postseason. And so, and that's not a great reason or whatever, great thought, but there's some truth to it, I think. And it is. I mean, even in the Rico Knows video, he said, like it is Division I football, man. It is FBS football is a good old boys club, and it's like you've got to like prove you belong. Pay your penance to stay and to get into that club. And now once you're in, the benefits I think are probably fantastic, right? Especially comparatively speaking. Especially if you're able to have the level of success that JMU has had. But it's a shame if let's say that after these couple years that they kind of return to, being very average. It would be a bummer because, that extra, to argue the other side of things, that extra income could have helped them catapult them into being even better for a longer period of time, especially in the era of NIL.
Yeah, but then what's the line, right? So let's say they are sustainable for 3 years, and then year 4, they stink. I mean, they can't do much about their coach leaving. So I feel like it just stacks the deck against them. But whatever, it is what it is. They're not going to participate. And if they go 2-8 next year, the NCAA can point and say, see, we were right this whole time. And that's just the NCAA flexing their muscles. So some other stuff that happened, I want to talk about Michigan for a second because you talked about them earlier. They ran the ball like 38 straight times against Penn State. Never once did I get the sense that they were scared of them at all. Penn State was awful offensively for a team that was in the top 10. And it was almost a slap in the face to the viewer from Michigan to say, oh, we think that we're so much better than Penn State. We're not going to pass the ball at all.
Yeah, the Dave Portnoy video I thought was absolutely hilarious.
It's perfect. It's
Like,
perfect.
we didn't even need the forward pass. We
Yes.
played like it was 1927. Like, and it
Unreal.
was, I mean, and they did, and it's like, but they were saying basically, Penn State, your offense cannot do anything against us, so we're just gonna sit here and we're gonna retain possession and just
Yep.
keep pounding and pounding and pounding away.
Yep.
Because you can do nothing about it. Like, it doesn't matter if we even score anymore because your offense is so inept, which is true.
Yeah, it was true. It was terrible. I think I texted you and I said Penn State has 0 offensive potency. And that is, I'm sorry, that is not a top 10 offense. That's awful. And I get it. They're a top 10 team in a lot of other places, but that offense was bad. The quarterback is bad. And does James Franklin know? Do you think he knows that you can pass the ball more than 3 yards? Do you think he knows that? Because I didn't get that sense watching them at all.
Dude, like, I don't know, man. I saw, like, in the first half at one point, they had kept flashing a stat on the screen. Like, Drew Aller was like 1 of 6 for like 19 yards or something like that, or
awful.
2 of
It's
7. I
awful.
mean, it was terrible, man. And I'm just like, if you're Michigan, I just stack the box. Screw it, man. Put 8 guys in the freaking box, and that may be what they did eventually. I didn't watch the entire game just because it was kind of a boring game to watch.
Awful. It's
It was
terrible.
not exciting in any way, shape, or form. And it was very, we talk about the boa constrictor, man. Like, Michigan just got their hands on them, dude, and just squeezed them into submission.
What did I say? The rare 14-9 game that feels like 34-9, because there's no way that I thought Penn State was going to come back at all.
No, not a chance.
Absolutely just ridiculous.
The Big Ten, where great offense goes to die. Where offensive football goes to die.
That is
in the Big
100%
Ten.
correct. So can we move on to Virginia Tech? I have some boasting to do here.
Let's go.
The Hokies traveled to Alumni Stadium in Boston and played Boston College, a 6-win Boston College team. And everybody was giving Budge a bunch of shit because they have played crappy teams and beat a lot of really crappy teams. And the Hokies did something that they haven't done in a very long time. They scored the most points on the road in an ACC game since 2005. And they looked the part. 48 points against Boston College, who looked terrible. Hokies got back to 500. They have 2 more chances to become bowl eligible. They have NC State coming up. That's going to be a tough one. Then they have UVA, which I think is a winnable game. But this was a game that they traditionally don't look good in. They don't play well on the road in Boston. And they looked awesome. I was so stoked to see them score 48 points. I feel like if they make a bowl, the future is bright. The future is bright with drones at quarterback. And I think that Brent Pry slowly but surely is bringing that program together to the point that they're going to have 3 wins again next year.
Oh, come on. No, man. I think that it's great. It's exciting. We've talked about it. I've said that I think that, Virginia Tech is one of those programs that them being good is good for college football, just because of the environment that they have there in Blacksburg is one of the best in the country. So, to have that and for it to mean something to play in Blacksburg on a Saturday night with Inner Sandman is important to college football, in my opinion. And I think in Virginia Tech also, I feel like it's one of those jobs that if you're able to get the thing rolling, because it's been proven by Frank Beamer that you can have long-term sustainable success there. If they're able to get that thing rolling, I think you could have a coach that stays there for a while, that's not going to be there just to use it as a stepping stone or a springboard to a bigger job. And maybe I'm naive in that thought this day and age, but I want that for Virginia Tech.
Yeah. Are there schools anymore that are that? Like, are coaches happy being the guy at one place for 30 years? Because I think that there are few and far between universities in which that's the case. Because right now,
Ferentz.
That's different. But I'm talking about I'm talking about now, right? Kirk Ferentz has been there since the forward pass was invented. So he's going to die at Iowa. But I'm talking about now, new age coaches now who are taking these jobs. This is Brent Pry's first head coaching position. Is it realistic to think that a guy like him, if he becomes successful at Virginia Tech, is going to stay there? Because everybody's trying to move to the SEC. I'm already seeing Dan Lanning from Oregon linked to the Texas A&M job. And I'm like, he could be a god at Oregon. Like Oregon is really, really good. And you're going to go to A&M because it's the SEC where the boosters could fire your ass at any point at halftime of a game that you're up by 40 points. You see what I mean? So I don't know how many schools or coaches, or actually it's more coaches who are willing to stay. But I think that a lot more coaches maybe should think about it, because don't you want to build a legacy? I mean, don't you want to be the guy in a town? Just my opinion.
Yeah, but also to flip back what we talked about earlier a little bit, college football fan bases and their boosters are, like I said, they're willing to eat their own, and so it's like all it takes is a couple bad years, and you could, next thing you know, you're getting fired, and then you're looking back, maybe kicking yourself because you didn't take that opportunity to springboard to the next job that's more money and things like that. And it's still business at the end of the day, and and I fully support these coaches. I do. I fully support them trying to go get theirs. No issue with that. But at what point, and I don't know, I mean, I'm never going to make this kind of money, but like, I think a lot of people like myself, you think at what point is at what point is it enough where like, is there really a difference between 10 million and 15 million? You know what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, but I'm sure if you're making 10 million and someone's offering you 15, there probably is a difference, I guess.
I guess I asked Craig Counsell that because he left the Brewers to go to the Cubs for a butt ton of money. So speaking of fan bases that will eat their own, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, Sam Hartman has the revenge game of the year as they play Wake Forest this week. Notre Dame gets back on it. Do you think anybody's going to get fired at the end of the season? And I'm asking not snarky, but I mean legitimately.
Oh, man, I feel bad saying this, but I hope so. Not Marcus Freeman, because I really like Marcus Freeman. I think that they have to, and my dad disagrees with me on this. He thinks they should give Jared Parker another year at offensive coordinator. I just don't think that Marcus Freeman can afford to take that chance. And there's arguments that, because the offense doesn't look a lot different than it did with Tommy Rees. So there is a conversation, there's arguments out there that maybe this is a philosophy that's trickling down from the head coach. As far as like a ball control offense, it's not going to take a lot of risks. I mean, Marcus Freeman was a defensive coordinator. He's a defensive-minded guy. Now, I think, though, if they would have gotten Andy Ludwig from Utah, like they attempted to, I think that if he had an proven experienced offensive coordinator, I think he would just stay hands off and let that guy do his thing. Outside of, the in-game go for it on fourth down, not go, that kind of stuff. But like, I think he would let that guy run his offense. But because he's had fairly inexperienced coordinators in his first 2 years, that he's felt he's had to impose his opinions and his control on the offense. Now, at the end of the day, can you hold Jared Parker responsible for that? I think you have to, just because you need someone in there that Freeman can let operate independently, without influence, and that's kind of my opinion.
I mean, isn't it an indictment on the offensive coordinator that you bring in Hartman, who was legitimately great at Wake Forest, an experienced guy? Shouldn't they be letting it rip?
Yeah, I think they've coached some of the gunslinger out of him, for sure. I fully believe that.
And that's fine, right? Like, that's fine. Take care of the football. But there's also a fine line between becoming a game manager, which I feel like when I watch Notre Dame this year, that's what he looks like. And I'm like,
very conservative.
That's not what you brought him in for. You
Right.
don't bring in a 6-year starter who almost won the Heisman to be a game manager, do you?
Yeah, I mean, no, you're right. I mean, and it's been reported too. I mean, he doesn't have any decision-making ability within the offense. Like, he doesn't, they've asked in press conference. I mean, he does not have the ability to audible out of a bad play call, anything. Which, again, to your point, I think that totally goes against why you would bring a guy like that in. They are treating him as if he were Drew Pine, who they
or a freshman. They're treating him like a freshman. And this is not a freshman. And again, like I don't follow Notre Dame football the way that a lot of these people do, but I've watched football long enough to know that Sam Hartman came in with a skill set that is not being utilized. And somebody has to take the fall for that, because next year, you're not going to have a 6-year starter. You're not going to have a guy with that kind of savvy behind there. And if you're not going to let him make the call or make an audible, you're not going to let him make an audible. Like, that's ridiculous. It's patently ridiculous. And I would be upset if it were Virginia Tech that way. I mean, hell, Virginia Tech let Hendon Hooker walk out the door.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's because there's people that question, like, why, we're coming to the line of scrimmage with 8 guys in the box on first down and still running it up the middle. Like, why aren't we checking out of that and getting into a better play call? Like, those types of questions are being asked. And it's been said that, Sam doesn't have that authority. And I think that's, and again, at the end of the day, it does trickle up to the head coach. So I don't want to let Marcus Freeman off the hook too much because he's he's the man in charge. Um, but I think to get a true gauge on Notre Dame's potential, they have to get a proven offensive coordinator in there. Al Golden's done a wonderful job. I think there's a really good chance that he may find his way back to the NFL after this season. I mean, he's had a good enough year that he's going to get plenty of offers if he's interested in taking them. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that if that happens. And there's a couple other position coaches that I think could be on the hot seat. The receivers coach being one of them. Again, not a ton of experience, and just the receivers just flat out have not been any good at all. And not, I mean, and sure, maybe it's part of the offensive philosophy, but they've really struggled.
Yeah, I've just been baffled watching this whole thing, and I feel like this is a hesitation that I have overall whenever a program or a franchise brings in a defensive-minded coach in today's football, where football is very offensive-centric. Now, in college football, it's a little bit different because you can't all be the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Like you have to deal with the players that you have and trying to play to their strengths. And that's where my problem comes down with this coaching staff is that they're not playing to all of their players' strengths. And it's one thing the receivers are bad, I get it, but it's one thing if Sam Hartman is able to do Sam Hartman things and the receivers are bad. You at least have something to point at it. But I'm like, if you were to sit down with Sam Hartman a year from now to a man and be like, so what was that like? And he's like, oh, 9 times out of 10, I knew we should have checked out of this play, but that's not my call. And
Now,
I feel like that to me is possibly what could happen. Maybe Sam Hartman doesn't know, but I highly doubt that.
now I'll say this. I have been baffled at some of his decision making during plays in the passing game. Um, and again, some of it may have been coached out of him, like I said, because there's times where, I mean, he's like the opposite of what we talk about Caleb Williams. Like Caleb Williams passes up reads to try to get to the big play,
Sure.
right? Like passes up the natural progression to get to the big play. Like Sam Hartman, man, that dude is locked in to the progression. And I don't know if he's a little rushed because he feels like he doesn't have time, but it's like the first guy he comes to that he thinks is open or could be open, ball's coming out. There just isn't that, because there's a lot of play calls that exist where you have a specific progression that maybe only includes 3 of the routes that are being ran. And maybe there's a guy on the backside that's running a vertical route, a post, something like that. And that's not even in your progression. But there comes a time where it's like, that's usually in high school what we'd refer to. That's a press box call. So like, you're not, as a quarterback, you're not worried about that unless the play call comes in. And because the coach from the press box has watched that nobody is paying attention to that guy and he's wide open. And then it comes down to like, hey, peek at the post. Peek at the post first. If it's open, take it. If not, get into your progression. But it seems like there's a lot of times where there are guys open downfield, and he just either isn't seeing them or he's so locked in on just getting the ball out that he never gets that far.
Maybe, but it's been baffling to me. But let's move on to the games in Week 11. I think that Notre Dame should win this game, but again, you never know with this Notre Dame team right now. So all I know is that Audric Estime will get about 40 carries on first down. So that you can take to the bank. So James picked Louisville at Miami. Miami is a 1.5 favorite at home. I was surprised by that line, but this feels like the kind of game where Louisville comes in. This is one of their last hurdles. They have Kentucky next week, which I think should be a more difficult hurdle because it's an SEC opponent. It's a rivalry game, but Miami's coming in with 4 losses. Mario Cristobal, I think, needs this win for a signature win for this year. I think it helps with recruiting. This season has been an unmitigated disaster in many ways for Miami since the kneel down that wasn't. And I feel like Louisville could be overlooking this game because they win this game and they get to the ACC title game. The rest of it comes down to playoff positioning after that. So I could see this being an overlooked game because Miami has some talent. They obviously have played well against other teams this year, including Texas A&M. So I don't know how you feel about it, but the line at Miami being 1 point, I was like, Vegas knows something or the money knows something.
Sure, and you're right. I do think this is one of those situations where you might have Louisville looking ahead, thinking, "Man, like if we get in the ACC championship game, we find a
Yeah,
way to win that game, and a
we got
couple
a
other
shot.
things, we get a little help." You never know, man. Like there may be a path for us, and maybe looking ahead and not even considering this game. Now, Jeff Brom's a very smart coach. He's been doing it for a long time at a high
Yeah.
level. But even great coaches have a hard time getting their teams locked in, especially, you know, young men at the
Yes.
college level. Their lives are full of distractions. You're still at that age where you think you know everything, and no one's going to tell you anything that you don't already know. So it'll be interesting. I hope Louisville wins. Because I would like to see an ACC title game that really means something, as
Yeah.
opposed to being
Foregone
only
conclusion.
one, and as opposed to having just one team there that has something to lose. Like I would like to see a game where you have two teams that really potentially have there's playoff implications for both teams possibly.
Yeah.
But
I
I
don't
mean,
think a
so
one loss Louisville gets in, though.
no,
There's
probably
no
not unless
way.
some really crazy shit happens. No, you're probably right there.
Possibly. You
But
never know.
I'm gonna take Louisville, man. I just because I just like to see him win. I don't know, but at the same time, like Mario Cristobal, like you said, I think they're a little desperate. I mean, he's really coaching to try to take some pressure off himself heading into next season.
Yes.
Because if they freaking uh if they finish this season on a really low note, like it's going to be a grueling and miserable offseason. He's really going to have to deliver next year to keep himself out of trouble.
Yes, and he's gonna have a hard time shaking the moniker of great recruiter, bad coach, or not as good of a coach. So we'll see. I too like Louisville in this game. James likes Miami. I think it's gonna be close though, but it would not surprise me if Louisville comes away with the old W. So Georgia gets another test. They travel to Knoxville to take on Tennessee. Don't sleep on this game. Georgia's going to have to show up. Now, they've been taking care of business, playing a lot of ranked teams. They took care of Missouri, they took care of Ole Miss, and you kind of wonder sometimes, like, when you're constantly on every single time, is there going to be a falter? Because there's three hurdles that still come between Georgia and the college football playoff. They have this. Next week, they have Georgia Tech, who they should beat handily. And they already know that they're playing Alabama in the SEC title game. That's the part that worries me, is already knowing that you have a slated spot against Alabama in a couple of weeks. It's a road game. However, Georgia is a 10-point favorite on the road, but I think Georgia's finally hitting their stride, and I think they're going to win this game, but don't sleep on this game, in my opinion.
No, I hear what you're saying. This is really kind of Tennessee's Super Bowl in a lot of ways this year
Yeah.
with some of the other games they've dropped. Like, they're out of the playoff hunt. And when you have playoff aspirations, going to the whatever.com bowl is not really interesting. So this would be one feather in their cap if they're able to find a way to win this game. That being said, I think that Georgia's playing the best football that they've played all year right now, and it's the best time to be playing football at the level they're playing. I think Georgia goes in there. I'm done doubting Georgia.
Oh, I'm not
I'm here
doubting them
saying it.
either.
I'm done doubting Georgia. I've doubted them all season. Done with it. They're for real. And I think that they take another step this week to proving that, and they go into Knoxville and beat the brakes off of the Volunteers.
Yeah, I'm not doubting them either because they've taken care of business against really high ranked opponents the last couple of weeks. And this is another chance to do that and continue to cement their resume. So I like the Bulldogs in this game. Kansas State at Kansas, getting that rare rivalry game a week before rivalry week. And the Jayhawks are no slouch this year. They've had some pretty big wins. Now, they had a big letdown after James picked them. Kansas State's a 10-point favorite on the road here, which I thought was kind of surprising. Neither of these teams is in the national spotlight, but I'm desperately rooting for the Jayhawks here because I'd love to see them get a big win and continue on this trend. And they've had a good season. It's been a good story.
Yeah, it's like they get up for big games, it seems like,
Yeah.
and this is one for sure. I do think the 10 points is a lot, especially with the game being in Lawrence. And yeah, I'm with you, man. Like it wouldn't surprise me if Kansas State finds a way to win, but I think that it's going to be much closer than the 10-point spread indicates.
I agree. So Washington at Oregon State. Washington still has a lot of tests between now and the playoff.
Yes.
Oregon State is a 1-point favorite at home. And I know they're a 2-loss team, but they have played really well against a lot of really good competition. This is a game. I think this might be Oregon State Super Bowl right now. I mean, they play Oregon, of course, next week, but Oregon State has the chance now to upset 2 playoff contenders in their conference in a row and possibly even sneak in to the Pac-12 title game. They're a 1-point favorite at home. So you've got possibly the Heisman favorite coming in. Washington team that, needed a little bit of help last week against Utah. Another game opponent, of course. I'm going to do it. I think the Beavers are going to win.
Yeah, how about that, man? Like, you are a 1-point favorite against the number 5 ranked team in the country, and you're not even in the
Correct.
top 10.
I think they're 11.
But Oregon State is a different team at home than they are on the road, and they've proven that this year. And he's a solid, experienced veteran quarterback at this point in time. He's not going to shy away from the spotlight and playing in a big game. So, I might be with you, but I feel like there've been a few weeks here where I've really started. I've doubted the big Penix energy a few times, and he shows up and he delivers every time so far. But why not, man? Why not?
I don't know. I
Go
feel
Beavs.
like
Go Beavs.
There's just so many tests, and they have struggled the last couple weeks. Remember, took a little bit more to get past Stanford, took a little bit more to get past Utah. So are they running out of steam is my question. And you can run out of steam against lesser opponents. Oregon State theoretically is not a lesser opponent. So they have played really well all year long, and they're at home. As you said, they're a different team at home. And I have not checked to see if Budge picked them, but it would not surprise me. So the last game on the docket here for college is Texas at Iowa State. The only reason I'm mentioning this game is because Matt Campbell may be coaching for his job. I think that if he wins this game, he keeps his job. And Texas is a 7.5-point favorite on the road. There's too much at stake for Texas. I think that they're going to be locked in because they are looking to win the Big 12 and get into the playoff if they can as a Big 12 champion. But it'll be interesting to see if Iowa State keeps this close and if Matt Campbell can get a signature win to continue to keep his job and not have to fight the student section.
You think he has to win this game to keep it? What if it's close?
He has been talked, I know, but he has been talked about, and you've talked about him last year, about the new up-and-coming coach. And Iowa State hasn't really, in my opinion, taken this massive step ahead. And earlier in the year, they were disappointing. Now, they finished a little bit stronger, and they did have, I believe, an inside path to the Big 12 title game. But I'm not saying he's going to get fired after this game. But if they finish 6-6, like how, in today's day and age.
When was the last time that Iowa State was even relevant?
I don't think it matters.
In college football. I mean, I don't know. And maybe this
They're
may
not
be a
relevant
case
now.
This may be a case where he had opportunities and didn't take them, and he's ended up regretting it. Like,
I agree.
Because he stayed maybe waiting for a certain job or something, or thinking that he was going to be able to turn Iowa State into a perennial, conference title, playoff contender of some sort. But yeah, I at the same time, I think if you're Iowa State, you got to look in the mirror and say, you know what, we're Iowa State, and and this is still pretty damn good. What this guy's been able to do over his tenure, and who the hell is going to come to Ames, Iowa, that's going to be better? What's your upgrade?
Jimbo Fisher, which is what Jonah
there's
was asking about.
Chance. No chance. And I said this last year with Prime. I got burned. No chance Jimbo Fisher goes to Texas A&M. Not a chance.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right. I can't see him doing that.
No way, man. Like, do I think he'll coach again? Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if he takes a year off, does a TV thing. What's fascinating, too, we didn't mention about his buyout, is that it comes with, like, no contingencies. That
Nope.
He could go take another job, and it doesn't impact that buyout one bit. So
making some absolute bank going forward.
Who's at the end of the day, like, is Jimbo? I mean, if you're Jimbo Fisher, like, are you walking out of there being like, man, what a failure I am? Or are you
no, he thinks he's great.
Jokes on these suckers, man. Like, I'm out of here. I don't have to do this song and dance with these crazy people at Texas A&M anymore. Nope. And I got $78 million to show for it. So, I mean, because Texas A&M is a unique place, in my opinion. Like, that's a very unique culture. I mean, they have a very inflated opinion of themselves.
I was about to say, they think very highly of themselves.
And what makes it worse is they are in – Texas doesn't know that this is happening, but Texas A&M is always trying to outdo Texas. It's like one of those deals, like the little brother syndrome. And yeah, Texas is like, it's just
get exactly. So let's move on quickly to the NFL. I want to talk about it a little bit. We don't want to keep everybody too long. We know it's getting late here on the East Coast. So Josh Allen and the Bills, man. So 2 years ago, Josh Allen was the darling of the ball, came within, 13 seconds of beating Patrick Mahomes to make the Super Bowl or to have another chance at getting to a Super Bowl. And they're now 5-5. They fired Ken Dorsey, former Miami Hurricane, who I saw play live back in 2001. And Stephon Diggs is unhappy. And my only question that I have for you is their current Super Bowl window shut?
Yes. I think that these windows are shrinking in the NFL in general. There's just so much parity anymore. So much parity. And with a lot of these up and coming young coaches, there's so much turnover in the coaching ranks too at the NFL, level. Because everybody wants a new hot offensive genius,
Yep.
right? I mean, look at Sean McVay, right? I mean, he had his little
He had a
he
moment.
blew up really quick, but now he's very mid now.
Yeah.
The Rams are very average, and I mean, one, it shows how hard it is to be that good, and to win a championship in the NFL, and let alone sustain it, which makes what the Patriots did so impressive, which makes what Andy Reid has been able to do, not just at Kansas City, but also when he was in Philadelphia, very impressive. But I think the days of these like lengthy dynasties are really going to become a thing of the past. And you're going to have that little small window of time to capitalize. And if you don't do it, the wheels are going to fall off fast. And I could be wrong, but I really do think that maybe the Bills' time is starting to pass us.
I don't think their time with Josh Allen is starting to pass, but I think their time with this current crop of players is certainly passing.
Josh Allen equal John Elway?
Well, so you talked about Sam Hartman and how they've coached the gunslinger out of him. And I don't even know if it's gunslinger, but Josh Allen, to me, plays YOLO football a lot, where, you talk about Caleb Williams going past progressions to make a play. Josh Allen sometimes, I think, cannot help himself. He's almost not himself when he doesn't turn the football over. And this is what he looked like before Daboll got there and before Diggs got there. Daboll has been gone for 2 years now, and Josh Allen has kind of been regressing a little bit to the mean. I'm not saying he's not a good quarterback. Like, I would still take him over a vast many quarterbacks in the league. But if they can't get him to stop turning the ball over, not all the turnovers are his fault, but turnovers kill you. And they have been losing the turnover battle. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. And I said this last year about them, and it's still true today, that their offense has been a one-trick pony. It has been Stephon Diggs. They don't have a lot of other weapons at the receiver position and the skill positions. And I think Josh Allen is not the kind of guy who can overcome that because he's too prone to going rogue.
When's the last time the Bills had a running back that you would have wanted on your fantasy football team?
Thurman Thomas.
What about CJ Spiller, man? Like,
I'm kidding.
But no, it's been a long time though. That's my point. Like, they're one of those teams that's like they have no identity in the run game at all.
You're impressed that I pulled out Thurman Thomas like
that's
right
great.
away. Like,
That's fantastic. They have no identity in the run game whatsoever.
No.
And what you wonder too is Josh Allen one of those people? I wouldn't have guessed this, but of course I don't know Josh Allen at all. But maybe when he came in, he was, because there were a lot of people who were very critical of him coming out of Wyoming and not very high on him.
Inaccurate.
And so maybe he came in as a sponge, right? It's like was very coachable, listening, doing what he was told, developing. And maybe he got to the point where he started feeling himself a little bit, reading his own headlines and thought, you know what, I've arrived. I've got this figured out. And then he started tuning everyone out. And
that's always a great visual, by the way. You like to think of I think of Josh Allen in front of this wall of TVs and he's just watching highlights and he's like, God, I'm good. Damn, right. I'm good. And the coaches are trying to call him. He's like, I'm watching myself here.
But it's not like you could say Brian Daboll was like because he's really struggling in New York right now. So
Tommy DeVito. That's all I gotta say about that.
So I saw Jonas thing. So was Josh Allen on the cover of Madden this year? He was. Or played Madden.
He was. Tom Brady's the only one who's gotten by the curse, by the way, because I think Tom Brady won a Super Bowl the year that he was on it. Or made the Super Bowl the year. Is
it typically injured, or is it just you have a bad season? So long for a time, I thought it was like injured. Like you
either or. It plummets your season. The Bills, though, have a chance because the NFC North, which is actually pretty strong, in the last 3 days, there have been 3 season-ending injuries. So Joe Burrow was out with a torn ligament in his wrist. He's gone. Mark Andrews is out, and Deshaun Watson is out for the year. And all of a sudden now, the AFC is wide open, and the Steelers, who, by the way, have been outgained in every single game they have played this year and are still 6-3. Mike Tomlin has that team possibly getting to a place where they could win the division. Now, I think that the Ravens are still the favorite because they still have Lamar Jackson, but Lamar Jackson throws to Mark Andrews quite a lot. So the grit NFC North has taken a major hit here. And I have to ask you, though, with the Steelers playing the way that they've been playing, Kenny Pickett hasn't been great. The team hasn't really been great talent-wise. Mike Tomlin, though, has the boys at 6-3, never had a losing season. He's a Hall of Famer, right?
Oh boy.
Putting you on the spot here.
My initial thought is to say yes, but I wonder if he needs another championship to like solidify that.
So you take the Big Ben years and think that it's Big Ben, right? And not Tomlin? No,
I don't know. I don't know, man. I mean, obviously what he's doing is impressive, but at the same time, one thing that you have to consider is the general stability of the Steelers organization. You know, if you were going to talk about top 10 the most well-run organizations in all of sports, and they look at the top 10, the Pittsburgh Steelers are probably there, I would think, in terms of the way they do business and the way they're able to sustain success. I mean, they've had like 3 coaches in the last 50 years or something. I mean, it's stupid. And you can't say that about anyone else. Is he almost like Matthew Stafford a little bit? Like Matthew Stafford like needed that Super Bowl to sort of like put himself across the finish line.
Maybe, but he's already got one. And
I
it was
know.
an exciting one, but
I know he does. At the end of the day, he probably is Hall of Famer. I think he is now, but sometimes I feel like people, especially if you get that Super Bowl earlier in your career, it's like recency bias sometimes. And I think there's a lot of politics too that play into the voting when it comes time for that stuff. But I mean, I like Mike Tomlin a lot. And is there another another NFL team that embodies their city the way that the Pittsburgh Steelers do?
Yeah, Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions, baby. Because speaking of future Hall of Famers, Dan Campbell and the Lions are 7-2. He's not taking the A&M job, and they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I'm saying it here now. The Lions play efficient football offensively. I think their defense is good enough to win. Dan Campbell I love him. I
do
absolutely
too,
love him. And I do think that he is coaching that team to embody Detroit. Detroit is a gritty city. Gritty city. And I don't mean that in like it's dirty or whatever. I'm talking about the people. Tough. They work hard, right? And Dan Campbell is that guy. And I love Dan Campbell because who you see on the sideline, who you see behind the camera, that's him. Like that is him all day long. He is not playing a character. That is 100% him. I love that about him to the point that I would love
to have a beer with Dan Campbell. If I ever get into like have a terminal illness and I'm able to make a wish, it might be to have a beer with Dan Campbell.
Okay. Well, we'll try to make that happen. Maybe we can get him to come onto the show. 2 things left in the NFL. So Josh Dobbs is making the news right now because he's having one hell of a story where he goes to Arizona. They send him to Arizona. The Cleveland Browns do right before the season starts. And he doesn't know any players' names. And he played serviceable enough for a team that has 0 talent. Kirk Cousins gets hurt. Josh Dobbs gets traded to the Vikings. Still doesn't know anybody's name. He's now 2-0. And he beat Arthur Smith, who doesn't know how to use a friggin' offense at all with all these players that are on his team. And I know people are getting caught up in the hype. I'm not saying that he's going to have a future as a starter, but I love the story because I just love that the guy doesn't know where the locker room is, and he knows and he's smart enough to pick up a playbook and be like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, it's a really neat story, and I've seen a lot of little clips on TikTok about guys that played with him at other stops or knew him from college. Just talk about how smart of a guy he is, how great of a guy he is, hardworking, and I feel like every other year, something like that, we always get a story like this. Somewhat, and it's sort of a flash in the pan. And this is one I would really like to see sustain itself. And it kind of makes me think of Brock Purdy a little bit. Maybe a similar situation to that. A guy that comes in that, because it's not unprecedented to see a backup come in and have success. but eventually the midnight strikes, Cinderella, and they turn back into a pumpkin. But I think that um, Josh Dobbs seems solid enough to have some bit of stability moving forward. I mean, and part of it, I mean, he played really well for Arizona.
He
I mean,
did.
this is a bad team. I mean, he played
Really
really
bad
well
team.
for Arizona. I mean, because I remember watching him early in the season. I'm like, man, this guy's good.
He's playing
Um,
tough. Like, he's
yeah,
playing hard. And the great thing about him, he was an aerospace engineering major. And like, he's a really, really smart dude. I think Dave said, he's like, I know this guy is a literal rocket scientist, but he's picking up the playbook in like 30 minutes. And I think Cleve said, and the guy on the Jets can't even figure out how to make milk and cookies. And he's been on the team for 3 years, Zach Wilson, right? Can't even pick up the fundamentals of the game. Josh Dobbs has been traded here, there, everywhere. And everywhere he goes, he is a professional, and he's winning football games for the Vikings right now, who 0-3 to 6-4, and they've lost their quarterback, and now they feel like maybe they have a chance to make the
right.
playoffs, and that's pretty cool.
I mean, we've seen backup quarterbacks come in, but have we ever seen someone trade midseason for a quarterback, another starter for that?
No.
I mean, well, Josh Dobbs started. Now Kyler Murray's back, but like, let's call him a starter midseason, and that person come in and just pick up right where the other guy left off. And
Not
I mean,
quite.
how's this play out for Kirk Cousins?
Well, Kirk Cousins is interesting because I think the Vikings have a tough call in front of them. If Justin Jefferson doesn't want to sign with them, to me, it doesn't make sense to keep Kirk Cousins. Get whatever you can for him, because if you're not going to be able to get anything for Jefferson, why do the same thing with Kirk Cousins? I think Kirk Cousins still has a couple of years left of being able to play at a Super Bowl level, and I think that there are teams that could use him. I mean, imagine if he was on, well, I say imagine if he was on the Falcons, but Arthur Smith would probably not do anything with him, and he'd probably bench him for the guy that was on the bench. But my point is that you talk about Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and they've been trotting out Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. Like, if you're putting out Kirk Cousins again, that's an 11-win team, like right off the bat. And so if the Vikings aren't that team, and I understand Kirk loves it there, he's a good guy, but I'd want to win. And I think that after watching the documentary, I do think Kirk Cousins desperately wants to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, he strikes me as one of those guys that's done everything the right way, that's lived right. He prepares, he works hard. Um, but sports, especially, are a cruel mistress in a lot of ways,
Yes.
because you could do all of those things and it doesn't guarantee success at all, especially in a team sport where you're reliant on other people, and in football especially. So I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of like potential landing spots for him. Like, what if Kirk Cousins to the Giants, Kirk Cousins to the
There's no way.
to the Steelers?
I don't think so. I think that they're in on Kenny Pickett, and
Yeah.
I think that's it. But speaking of the Steelers, James picked the Browns to beat them this weekend. The Browns are 1.5-point favorites, although Deshaun Watson is not playing. So to me, that speaks to how bad the Steelers have been offensively. People are not buying into them even at 6-3, and the Browns defense is still possibly the best in the NFL. So that's an interesting one. I do think the Browns may suffer from not having stable quarterback play, but they've also won a game with PJ Walker. So you never know. That team seems to be stable enough that they can continue to win. They kind of need this game, though. Both teams really do. But this will be a test for the Steelers, because if they can get a win on the road, then they're 7-3, and maybe Kenny Pickett puts some things together. But offensively, they've not been good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Browns are like sneaky decent this year.
They are. They're 6-3.
You know what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, because I've watched them a few times. I'm like, when you watch them, I'm just like, they don't look good, but they're 6-3. So they just find a way to win. It's ugly, but I mean, what's the
Gritty.
It's so Cleveland.
Yes.
The way they're performing, but
Yes.
I think it's gonna be a great game. I don't know that I have a real definitive feeling about how it's gonna go. I think it's gonna be a really good ball game, though.
Yeah, I do too. So this is the one I put on here because I think it's funny for one reason. Raiders traveling to Miami to play the Dolphins. Dolphins are 13-point favorites at home. Now, the Raiders have had quite a season. They fired Josh McDaniel. Antonio Pierce, who won a Super Bowl with the Giants, is now coaching them. They've won 2 straight games. And I think that Raiders fans have convinced themselves that the Raiders are something to behold when the 2 teams that they beat are the Jets and the Giants. And now they're getting a real football team who knows how to play real offense. And the Dolphins are undefeated against teams that are bad. And I think this is one of those where I think Raiders fans are going to find out exactly what the Raiders are when they play the Miami Dolphins, because the last two teams that they beat, they ain't the Miami Dolphins.
No, and I think that 13 points is a ton
It's
in
a
the
lot.
NFL.
I was surprised at that.
But even then, I don't know that I would sweat laying 13 points and taking the Dolphins in this game. I think that one, it's in Miami, cross country travel, and this time of year especially, Miami's still much warmer than it is in most of the rest of the country, and they play in an outdoor stadium, and people may underestimate this, but that takes a toll on teams. So, I don't know what time of day this is. I don't know if it's a noon game or if it's I doubt it's a Sunday night game. Maybe it is, but that's something to come into play. And I guarantee you the Dolphins will wear all white and make the Raiders come out there in their black uniform.
Yeah.
So I think all that stuff plays into a little bit. Like I said, when you add in the cross country travel, the fact that the Raiders are playing with an interim head coach. Coming off 2 wins, but they're not very impressive wins, like you mentioned.
No. So I put that on there. So Jets traveling to Buffalo to face the Bills. Bills are 7-point favorites. This feels like a prove-it game to me for the Bills. They have some things break their way with injuries. They lost to the Jets in the opener. I think the Bills are going to come out here with a vengeance because they have something to prove to everybody that they're not quite dead.
Yeah, they have to. And I think that if you're a Bills fan, you're hoping you come out and see a dominant performance. Just to give you some faith that things are moving in the right direction and the season is not lost. But I don't know. At the same time, these are 2 reeling football teams a little bit. I feel like I don't know if maybe it's a little aggressive to say the Bills are reeling, but
they need to put some things together.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, and they have plenty of time to do it, but they better get the train back on the track pretty quick.
Yeah, they got to start soon. Vikings traveling to Denver. So Denver has sneakily put some things together and is 1 game under 500. Denver is a 2.5-point favorite. This is one where Josh Dobbs now, he's played a couple of home games, I think, or maybe he hasn't. I can't remember. But this is going to be a tough game in the elements, of course, in the altitude. And Denver has been playing well. Denver just beat Buffalo the other night. Now, they didn't look awesome doing it, but a win is a win. So this could be interesting to me. I think that the Broncos, to me, feel like they are favorites in this game because I think that they are playing a little bit better. And Josh Dobbs, as great of a story as it is, it does have a ceiling, I think. And if they lose this game, he's 2-1 with the Vikings. That's probably better than you thought it was going to go.
No, you're right. But what if they win it, man?
Oh, it'd be great. I'm rooting for them.
How awesome is that?
I'm totally rooting for them.
I am too. I'm absolutely rooting for them. And it does look like the Broncos have started to get their shit together a little bit.
They have.
And I think that, there's been a lot of injuries in the AFC in general. And yes, they play in the same division as the Chiefs, which, that shouldn't be overlooked. And yes, Miami's in the AFC also. But I think that I wouldn't sleep on the Broncos, man. Not with Sean Payton, not with Russell Wilson. Like, I don't think that you can sleep on the Broncos. But this is it'll be interesting to see if the Vikings can just keep building on this momentum that they have, especially going on the road for the first time with Josh Dobbs.
Yes, I agree. And easily the game of the week, Eagles traveling to Kansas City, a Super Bowl rematch. Chiefs are 2.5-point favorites at home. Honestly, I feel like this game is a push, but Kansas City playing at home, I think, gets that nod a little bit. And when we talk about elite quarterbacks and we talk about like a guy like Josh Allen or a guy who loses talent, Patrick Mahomes has had a lot of turnover. Now, he's had Travis Kelce there, obviously, but this year, outside of Travis Kelce, there's not a lot of other weapons on that team. And they continue to do what they have to do to win football games. And to me, that is a sign of being elite. And Jalen Hurts, obviously, on the other side of that, the Eagles continue to roll. This is going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be a close game. I like the Chiefs at home, though, because, again, that home factor. And there's something about Mahomes. He delivers in the biggest moments. He really does. Even if the team is struggling, he is willing to get that first down by running forward. He's willing to make the big throw. Like, the guy's got the it factor that we talk about, and I just think that it matters in games like this.
Yeah, except for earlier this year when he didn't have Travis Kelce and he seemed lost, I thought, right?
He still won a couple games,
for example, against like the Lions game, right?
Yeah.
I felt like he seemed lost without him. Sure. Yes, you're right. But the Chiefs are coming off of a bye week.
Yes.
And with a guy like Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, that's a huge advantage.
Isn't Andy
And
Reid like 14-1 or like some ridiculous stat after a
I,
bye week?
I'm sure that he is. And so the Chiefs are coming off a bye week and Super Bowl rematch. You've got, I mean, think of the star power that's going to be in Kansas City this weekend. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, both Kelsey brothers are going to be there. Obviously, Mahomes, Taylor Swift, I'm sure, is going to be in the house,
Ugh.
and Mama Kelsey is going to be in the house. I mean, we should play a drinking game. Like, we drink every time they show Taylor Swift or Mama Kelsey. We'll be drunk by the end of the first quarter.
Yes, we will be. So that brings us to the end. We have gone through college and the NFL. We thank everybody who is still with us here. Want to remind everybody that on Thanksgiving, we're going to be doing a live stream under INC Live where we're going to be doing a little watch party. And we're going to have somebody else. My brother-in-law, Mike, is going to come and join us. We are both going to be in South Carolina. Coach will be virtual as always.
Bring your leftovers.
Yes. I'm hoping to eat pie while we're talking here. That is my hope, because the way we do Thanksgiving is we eat about 1:30, 2 o'clock, so that by the time the night game rolls around, I can get to the seconds, because I like to get in there and get after it, because Thanksgiving is a great day if you like to eat like I do. So we're going to be watching live and commenting. There's probably going to be kids in the room. My father-in-law will be watching the TV too. So it's going to be about as amateur and unprofessional as anything we've ever done, but that's how we roll here at INC Sports and on INC Live. So if you want to find us on social media, of course, you can go to TikTok at INC Sports. You can go to Twitter, X at Iceman Coach, Facebook, INC Sports. Some people are watching on the Facebook page right now. On Twitch, we have some people who are watching. INC Sports is the channel. I like to re-air some of these shows every so often. If you want to find us regularly, Apple, Spotify, in the audio world, or any other podcast app, we're on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe. Matty Ice Media Network right above my head up here, MattyIceMedia.com. I'll duck a little bit and get the mic sounding real good so you can see that URL right there. And Coach, first Football Friday, it is in the books. INC Live is the future of this. I'm looking forward to it. What else do you have to say to the two people that are remaining in the feed right now?
No, it's been a pleasure, a lot of fun. Thank you, whoever is still watching, whoever stopped by, for hanging out with us. Jonah, thank you for interacting and keeping things interesting as always. Obviously, we appreciate Dave stopping by.
Yes.
Always a pleasure. A couple of big college football games this weekend, so it'll be fun. We got the big, the Chiefs, Eagles in the NFL, and a couple other ones to keep an eye on with the Vikings and Broncos especially. Other than that, I'm looking forward to a good, relaxing weekend and enjoying football. It's supposed to get kind of cold here this weekend, like maybe start getting down to the 30s a little bit. The cold front coming through, so I'm gonna have that window cracked right by the recliner, a little crisp air coming through, as I've talked about before, and really pumped for the holiday season to get kicked off. Looking forward to Thanksgiving and all the little things that come along with it.
Agreed.
The watch party on Thursday night is going to be a lot of fun, and it'll be fun to try something new and just get together on that day and hang out and enjoy a little sports.
Yes, and depending on how things go, we may do a live episode of the main show, Iceman Coach. It just depends on how things are rolling with family and all that stuff. But I thank everybody for tuning in this week. We will be back on Thursday for the watch party. We will be back on Friday for Football Friday. From the Iceman and the Coach, hope this finds you well and safe. And as always, this is Football Friday.